Two men stand facing each other, their swords drawn and ready to fight. Charles tells his opponent that he is showing recklessness. Atel smirks, saying that he will defeat him and walk the path of the Overlord. The blonde man named Charles is the greatest warrior their world has ever known, while the other man is the original author reincarnated as a mob. The two fight head-on, their swords clashing as they show who is the superior one between them. Atel produces a powerful magic attack, destroying everything in its wake, utterly surprising Charles. The warrior already memorized the move and effectively launches a counterattack, releasing a crazy amount of magic and energy. Atel is thrown by the overwhelming attack, but he easily catches himself and tries to fight back again. However, Charles is more agile than him, leaping to his side and slashing him. With determination, the warrior intends to finish the fight and charges toward Atel once again. The man is thrown off to the farthest side of the field, his body covered in injuries. He then suddenly opens his eyes as if nothing happened. A novelist named Sato is signing his contract after miraculously achieving a massive hit with his free serialization of 400 chapters as the author of the Overlord's heroic saga. He is excited to sign the contract since it means that his book will be made into a game. Finally, after being a nameless author, all his hard work and effort will be rewarded. Grateful, he signs the contract and inks his signature onto the paper, hopeful that his brilliant future awaits him now. However, in a crazy twist of events, he finds himself dangling at the edge of the rooftop of a building after someone pushes him off. He desperately clings to it, not wanting to die and shouting for help. As he looks up, he sees the agent who made him sign the contract earlier. He begs the man to save him and, shockingly, the person can read his thoughts. Sato is shocked that the man can communicate with him inside his head, more so when he witnesses that the man transforms into a non-human with many eyes around his head. The agent then raises his foot and steps on Sato's hand, making it hard for him to hold on anymore. As he is about to fall, he reminisces about the life he had, lamenting that he is just starting to have a better life and his efforts are just starting to pay off. He just started working and he hasn't been able to show his filial piety to his mother. More than that, his novel is still unfinished. Full of determination, he pushes himself to hold on and live longer. Suddenly, his body is charged with extraordinary power and energy. This helps him lift himself from the edge of the rooftop and attack the creature who assaulted him. Because of his undeniable power, the whole building gets engulfed in fire and collapses in seconds. Sato is surprised by what he did. Levitating, the enemy is impressed that he possesses the berserker and the authority of savagery. The creature grabs him by the neck and tells him that he contains such wonderful power that will make him experience new life in the world he created himself. Promising that they will meet again, the man then releases his hold on him, making him free fall. The scene then shifts to a bulky man who is welcomed by a system to the Overlord's heroic saga. He then comes across a massive bear and runs away like a coward from the wild animal. He has no intention of dying from a predator, so he runs farther into the forest. To his surprise, he gets suddenly equipped with a weapon that he uses against the massive animal. To his surprise, he easily defeats it and is shocked to see that he now has a different body. After he is pushed by a mysterious man from the rooftop of the building, he ends up in the world of the novel he wrote, and his body evolves to the level of a warrior. He has a pair of perfectly trained biceps, a thick chest, and rock-hard abs. There is no denying that he is now a muscular man with a chiseled chest. On top of that, his senses feel sharper, and now he can sense his surroundings more easily than before. He then smells the same beastly scent from before and realizes he is about to face more than one of them. He decides to get out of the woods when he hears a screeching scream coming from deeper in the forest. A trail of dead bodies victimized by the beastly bears lies on the ground. A girl named Erica grieves her fallen comrades, who were all annihilated by 4 bears in total. She shakes in fear as she hides behind the trees, praying that the beast won't find her. However, one of the huge bears manages to smell her human scent and attacks her. She tries to be brave and fight, but she is sure she stands no chance against the beast, though she doesn't want to die. Adel punches the bear and is surprised by his own ability when he manages to bring it down in a single attack. Even he finds his strength insane, but tries to act cool in front of Erica. She recognizes him as Atel and is petrified to see him since the man should already be dead. She then sees a group of beasts behind him and tries to warn him about it. Atel faces the 3 beasts and tells the girl to stay behind him as he confidently fights the predators. Overpowered, he takes them one by one with great agility and strength. He takes them down one at a time with successive blows, not giving them a chance to recover. The girl just stares at him in awe at how easily he defeated the beasts. As he basks in victory, Erica approaches him and calls him by the name Atel. Confused, he doesn't know how to react until she throws herself at him and hugs him tightly. She cries heavily, knowing all too well that he would come back to her alive one day, and that her wish has finally come true. Atel blushes hard as the beautiful girl continues to hug him. Ecstatic, she tells him that they need to go home right away so they can celebrate his safe arrival with their whole village. Meanwhile, he tries hard to remember who Atel is. Suddenly, a pop-up system flashes the information of Atel, automatically filling his head with Atel's memories from his distant past and from when he was just a child training with his father until a huge bear went after him in the forest, effectively ending his life. That was the very last memory before his death. However, the scene shifts again, and he discovers that because of a man's conspiracy, he was killed and has been reincarnated as some barbarian extra. He contemplates that it would have been easier if he were reincarnated as the protagonist of the story. Noticing that he is in a daze, Erica checks on him, asking if he is okay. He assures her that he is alright but notices that she is full of injuries from the fight earlier. Concerned, he tells her to hop on his back so he can bring her to the village safely. He contemplates how he will get out of the game, but first, he decides to head to the village to hopefully discover things that can help him return to his world. Atel brings Erica to the village at insane speed, almost making her pass out from how he handles her. He picks up a fruit along the way, uncaring if the girl on his back is okay or not. He bites into the fruit and is surprised to discover that it is delicious. Delighted, he offers some to the girl, but she turns down the offer, clearly annoyed by him. Later, they finally arrive at the Black Wolf tribe's settlement. Upon hearing that Atel has come back alive and well, the whole village runs up to greet and welcome him, surprised and thankful that he wasn't killed by a bear. Atel is then stunned upon seeing the entirety of the village and its people. He remembers the world of the Black Wolf tribe from his novel. For him, seeing it in the flesh is the greatest reward he can receive as an author. Just then, he hears heavy and commanding footsteps and sees a massive man shouting his name. The villagers bow before the man, and Atel realizes he must be his father. He remembers that this man is the legendary warrior said to have scattered an army of 5,000 all by himself. The man, called Munzu, is the Black Wolf tribe chief and exudes a terrifying aura. He asks Atel if he has something to say to everyone, and Atel quivers in place just by looking at his father. To his utter surprise, Munzu runs up to him and hugs him tightly, squeezing the life out of him. The massive old man cries uncontrollably, sobbing between his words while Atel almost turns blue from how tight he is being embraced. Munzu rejoices at the thought that his only son has come back to life, just as the fortune teller said. He wipes his tears and announces that there will be a feast for the whole village to celebrate his son's safe return. That night, the villagers share a grand feast to honor Atel's homecoming. He bonds with the villagers and observes how lively they are. A group of people dance to the legend of the great martial king. They beat the drums, and every strike commemorates how the great martial king was slain by his enemies yet returned from death. Erica dances gracefully, each step exuding elegance and strength, depicting the legend of the martial king protecting the village as its savior. Everyone, including Atel, is captivated by how charming and effortless her dance is. As he watches the dance, he can't help but think about how he will exit this world and remembers that there is only one answer to his problem: the Fairy Kingdom. It is the nation of the most powerful magic users and the setting of War Chronicle of the Supreme Hero, because that's where he would have put the exit. He chews on his food when Bleda, the Black Wolf tribe's gold belt warrior and Munzu's younger brother, appears and congratulates him for defeating 4 bears. The man mentions that Atel has officially joined the ranks of the Gold Belt Warriors. He thanks the man but remains cautious of him. To receive a Gold Belt Warrior title is the greatest honor and a prerequisite for becoming a chief. Because of this, he is aware that he will be dragged into a fierce power struggle with his uncle. The two toast, but Atel doesn't take a sip from his drink, distracted by Bleda's scent. There is no mistake that he is the one who killed the past Atel. He then throws the contents of his mug and tells the old man to fight him. Bleda finds him amusing but tells his nephew that the feast has just begun and that they must enjoy it to the fullest. Atel tries to stop him from walking away, but the man simply bids him goodbye. He watches as Bleda retreats back into the village, realizing that Bleda only fights battles he knows he can win. The man must have failed to measure his true strength, and Atel is certain that he will be targeted by him again. Meanwhile, back in the village, Munzu happily interacts with his people and praises a kid who caught a rabbit, telling him he will be a great warrior when he grows up. Atel observes his father and can see that he is the complete opposite of his younger brother, Bleda. In his previous world, he never had a father, so he doesn't know how to act around the man. If he had a father, would he have talked to him and raised him with love like Munzu? Just then, the man enthusiastically waves at him, saying that he has something to give his son. He proudly shows him the mark of the Gold Belt Warrior, which is awarded only to those who have defeated 3 or more bears in a single hunt. Munzu bets that he must be so moved and overwhelmed that he goes speechless. He then tells his son to put it on, but Atel makes it awkward since he has never worn a belt like that before. Munzu is confused, so Atel reasons that he hurt his hand and can't tie the belt properly. Munzu happily offers to help him. As he ties the belt, the chief recounts the time when he first met Atel and tied his first belt. After fastening it properly, Munzu admires his work for a moment and comments that his son has grown so much, smiling warmly at him. He thanks him for coming back safely and tells him to show some joy since he received a gold belt as young as 16, which is unheard of. Although he knows this moment will be fleeting, Atel wants to savor it and admits that he is happy, as life there isn't so bad. Munzu and the warriors of the Black Wolf tribe cheer again, enjoying the night just as their chief likes it. As they continue their celebration, suddenly, Munzu drops his drink, and to everyone's shock, he transforms into a beast with large fangs. Atel runs for his father, worried he might have been poisoned. He screams as he holds his unmoving body in his arms. Suddenly, Munzu looks like a raging beast as he roars like one. Atel's status informs him that Munzu has the special ailment of berserk. Munzu is trying to attack his son, and Atel is barely stopping him with a grapple. It makes Atel realize that Breda's target is for Munzu to kill the village that the old chief loves so much. It enrages Atel that Breda is making his father kill the villagers he loves more than anyone. He urges his father to wake up, but he just ends up being hit on the face by the old man. He feels unimaginable pain from it. Atel looks at his father again and senses the overwhelming presence of a wild wolf in him. Munzu punches Atel, and it sends the young man back until a rocky wall stops him. Atel realizes he cannot stop him with brute strength. Meanwhile, Munzu is getting more and more out of control, so the villagers run away from him. A mother trips while running, making her child stop and urge her to get up. Within a second, Munzu is already near them. The mother screams for her son to leave her, but the boy grabs an axe and faces the old man. Despite being scared out of his wits, the boy swears he will protect his mother. Munzu is about to lay his hands on him, but Atel appears and blocks his attack before it gets to the boy. Atel praises the boy for being brave. He orders the nearby villagers to take care of the mother and child while he stops his father. The villagers run away. Munzu tries to punch Atel, but the man blocks its explosive force. Unfortunately, Munzu follows up with his other fist. Atel dodges, but the force cuts his right ear. Munzu punches him again with even more force, sending Atel flying back. Atel, however, grabs Munzu's arm, making him stand his ground. He sees now that he needs to go all out to stop his father. They hit each other over and over again. Atel tries harder with a quick barrage of punches, but Munzu withstands all of them. Munzu then punches his son over and over, and they all connect. The last one is even strong enough to destroy the ground beneath Atel. Atel tries his hardest to get back up. He remembers the child who stood his ground to protect his mother. As Munzu attacks, Atel thinks about how his father would give his life to protect his village. Atel's determination to get up gives him the power of heroic strength. He charges at his father and headbutts his chin. From the impact, a small pin comes off Munzu. The old man falls. Atel is so tired that he falls too. Munzu gets back up, horrifying Atel. However, Munzu is back to his senses and is confused about what just happened. Atel is surprised to see his father recovered from the berserk state. He spots the needle on the ground and is suspicious that it has something to do with it. Munzu goes to his son, thinking that he is hurt. Atel says he is fine, yet he still loses consciousness in front of his worried father. Meanwhile, Bleda and his men are on horseback elsewhere. Bleda thinks about how the berserk needle, which was crafted by a witch, was easily knocked out by a headbutt. He comes to believe that it must mean that Atel has some kind of special power. Bleda accepts his defeat for now, as he plans for them to die by tomorrow anyway. He and his men head to a cave. A growl in the shadows of the cave scares the men aside from Bleda. A giant white bear, restrained by a series of chains, demands that Bleda give back their child. The bear is wild, as its rage is at a fever pitch. Belda calls it Lord Calamity and wants to talk to it. Lord Calamity screams at him to be silent, as they don't want to listen. Belda shows that they have their bear cub and threatens to kill it if Lord Calamity can't talk. The cub cries as it reaches for its parent. Lord Calamity pleads for their child to be released. Bleda tells them to destroy the Black Wolf tribe in exchange for releasing their child. Lord Calamity roars in fury. The next morning, Atel wakes up in a bed. His body is filled with bandaged wounds, and his head hurts. Munzu reveals himself to also be in bed beside his. Atel asks him if he is okay. Munzu tells him that his body can't move yet. With great sadness, the old chief apologizes for what happened last night. Atel tells him that it was not his fault, and that Bleda was the one to blame. Still, Manzu feels sorry for himself since he failed to protect the village. He believes he no longer has the qualifications to be the tribal chief. Atel disagrees, but Manzu thinks what he did was too serious to be forgiven. Suddenly, they hear people approaching their tent. There are so many villagers that they trip over each other as they enter. They fight among each other as they try to say that they came to visit to see if the chief is well. The mother and her son, who was rescued before, thank Atel and assure Manzu that no one was hurt. She shares her trust in the chief and how she knows that he cherishes the villagers more than anyone. On behalf of the village, she tells him that they believe in him. Manzu is touched by her words and does not know what to say. She continues to say that she wants the chief to believe in them the way they believe in him. The chief covers up his tears. Meanwhile, the other villagers cheer and encourage the chief to protect the Black Wolf tribe for all of them. Manzu is in tears as he thanks everyone for their kind words. It makes Atel smile. Suddenly, another villager appears and urgently tells everyone that Lord Calamity is attacking the village. Outside, everything is on fire, and Lord Calamity is running wild. Atel remembers that he wrote the Calamity of the Forest as a revered legendary divine beast that once protected the Black Wolf tribe alongside the great martial god king. Now, a villager reports that the Lord Calamity is attacking their village. Atel quickly gets up from his bed, determined to face the beast god. His father, Manzu, pleads with him not to face it since a human is no match for a divine beast. Atel ignores his plea as he instead borrows his father's axes from the shelf. As he carries his 2 axes, he promises that he will return them after the battle. Atel goes outside, where he sees that the village is on fire while Lord Calamity is rampaging. Atel is shocked to see that the monster is so huge. Bleda appears on the scene with his men, and the villain welcomes his nephew into the battlefield. Seeing him enrages Atel. He looks so angry that he looks so much like Manzu in Bleda's eyes. Atel strikes a fighting pose and challenges him to fight. Bleda is amused by his bravery, but he tells him that he will not be his opponent. The gigantic Lord Calamity gets behind the villain and roars with the intensity of an earthquake. Atel asks why a divine beast is obeying his command. Bleda shows that he has Lord Calamity's cub restrained in his hand, as he tells Atel that all he had to do was capture what is most precious to the divine beast. He prides himself on reducing the divine beast to such a pathetic state after simply taking advantage of his weakness. With his command, Lord Calamity charges at Atel. The bear strikes with its giant paw and claws, which Atel blocks with his axes. The weight of the attack tells Atel that he would have died if he had faced it head-on. The white bear goes for a second strike, so Atel evades it. He acknowledges the divine beast's strength and speed, coupled with its body that is as hard as a rock that can't be cut. Lord Calamity roars, and it makes Atel scared of his sharp fangs. Atel then recalls that while rocks are too hard to cut with a blade, they can still be driven by a stake. This thought leaves him throwing one of his axes towards the bear with all his might. It leads to it being stabbed in Lord Calamity's right shoulder and hurting them. Atel then runs towards the beast. Lord Calamity strikes him with his paw, but the man jumps to evade. He then uses the momentum of his jump to swing the axe in his hand towards the axe, jammed in the bear's shoulder like a hammer, hurting the bear even more. The force of the attack dismembers Lord Calamity's right arm. The divine beast howls loudly and then dies and falls to the ground. The bear cub jumps away from the clutches of one of Bleda's men and goes to their parent to mourn them. Bleda is angered that the divine beast has proven itself to be useless. He commands his men to shoot arrows. They fire, and arrows rain down towards Atel. With a swing of Atel's axe, all the arrows get destroyed. Bleda's men fear that they are facing a monster. Just as they are about to run, Atel cuts them all down with the quickness of thunder. Atel's fighting spirit is stronger than ever as he challenges Bleda for a fight to end things. Bleda pulls out his axe and readies a fighting stance to meet his challenge. Atel and Bleda stare each other down, waiting for the other to make their first move. Suddenly, Bleda vanishes into thin air and reappears behind Atel. Atel did not sense him until the villain manages to wound his left shoulder. Bleda then attacks head-on. Despite Atel trying to block him, the villain's attack still reached him. Bleda makes multiple attacks, putting Atel on the defensive with no time to swing his axe. Bleda then disappears again and then reappears in a flash in front of Atel with a ready swing of his axe with all his might. Atel does not back down and faces his charge head-on. He manages to hit Bleda on the chest before the villain can get to him. Bleda gets pushed away. The villagers cheer for Atel's victory. Despite lying on the ground, Bleda laughs maniacally. Atel asks what is so funny. He reveals that his axe was thoroughly coated with the berserk poison. He declares that with the berserk poison in Atel's bloodstream, he will be the one who destroys the Black Wolf tribe. Atel then feels rage and pain in his body that makes him scream uncontrollably. Bleda laughs that he will turn into a beast and will die a wretched death. Atel continues to feel his body changing. Suddenly, Lord Calamity's spirit approaches him. The divine beast informs him that since he is more beast right now than human, he is able to hear and understand them. The white bear opens their mouth to show a sword on their tongue. Adel grabs it with his hand. Lord Calamity explains that it is the divine sword from the great martial god king, and that whoever defeats them is the one worthy to wield it. The white bear reveals that the sword's name is Miol. Atel can feel the power from the sword swirling within him. Lord Calamity then urges him to fight for those he must protect. Atel's physical body suddenly stops screaming, making the villagers and Bleda wonder what is happening. Atel wakes up with the divine sword of Miol in his hand and the presence of Lord Calamity emanating out of him. With a sound mind and an energized body, Atel tells Bleda that they should settle things. Atel then charges at the villain at lightning speed and is able to cut the villain's left eye off with a swing of his sword. As Bleda makes a counter swing, he notices that Atel is holding the divine sword of Miol. Atel slashes Bleda's chest with it, putting the villain down. It pains Bleda to see that Atel has been acknowledged by the divine beast. Bleda thinks back to his life of being born in an unfair world where he was constantly being compared to his naturally talented and strong older brother, Munzu. He recalls how his brother was popular with the others, while he was hated. Despite this, Bleda was driven to catch up to his brother because he revered him. He remembers how he battled many beasts and experienced many hardships just to catch up with him. In a battlefield of war, the Black Wolf tribe was cheering for the undefeatable brothers of Munzu and Bleda. Munzu was surrounded by dozens of enemies and was winning. He did not notice the one combatant sneaking behind him. Bleda saw this and ran to his brother. He protected his brother by taking the hit for him. It resulted in his left eye being scarred. After the battle, Bleda demands to know from his brother why he was not allowing him to participate in the next battle. Without looking at Bleda face to face, Munzu apologized and told him that he could no longer participate in battles because of his damaged eye. Bleda was enraged that his brother punished him for protecting him. In the present, Bleda is shouting at Atel that he is not the bad guy because it was Munzu and the Black Wolf tribe who abandoned him. He swears that he will destroy everything and then charges at Atel. Atel tells him to take responsibility for his actions. Atel rushes at him too, while swearing to protect his family and comrades. Both men make their move at the same time. Atel is the one who is able to land the blow. As Bleda gets pushed back and falls, he thinks about how he always knew that Munzu showed him kindness when he did not allow him to battle again, but that all he wanted to hear from him was for them to fight together again. He remembers when both brothers promised to fight side by side in battle. In the present, Bleda lies on the ground, slain. The villagers cheer for Atel's victory. A while later, Atel decides to leave for the fairy kingdom and says goodbye to his father and the villagers. The villagers regret his leaving, as they express how they want him to be the chief someday. Munzu tells them that he does not think his son is worthy of being the chief. They disagree as they tell him that Atel would do a fine job. It makes Munzu motivated to show them what he means. The chief swings his axe at Atel, so the man blocks his attack with his divine sword. Atel asks him what he is doing. The old man answers that he made a good defense, but that he is still soft and full of openings. Munzu makes a peaceful smile, confusing Atel. The old man elaborates that Atel is clearly special with a great destiny. He points at his divine sword as proof of this. He tells his son that people are tested in their souls when confronted by despair. With a sad face, he cites Bleda as an example of a soul who lost their radiance. He advises Atel to temper his mind, technique, body, and soul so he will not lose the radiance of his soul no matter what. Atel says he understands. Erica appears and suddenly rushes towards Atel. She gets so close to him that it makes Atel blush. It turns out that she has attached a necklace to him, which has a base made from the fang of a divine beast. Erica tells him that she made it for his protection. Just as Atel wants to tell him about his appreciation for it, Munzu suddenly tackles his son with a hug and begs him not to go. Atel waves goodbye to a crowd of people who love him. Later, Atel is in the middle of the forest and is camping while cooking meat over a fire. He is excited as the meat gets fully roasted. He is about to put the food in his mouth, but gets distracted by a noise. He looks at the distance and sees that Lord Calamity's bear cub has followed him. Atel wonders how long the bear is going to follow him. He tells it to go home, but the cub does not seem to understand and is just happily coming towards him. Its stomach growls loudly, so Atel gives it a piece of meat. The bear is so hungry that it puts Atel's hand inside its mouth. Aside from just the meat, he is able to feed the cub with only the meat, but he is frustrated that his hand is now covered with saliva. It pisses him off so much that he swears that he is leaving the small creature behind. He then gets scared as he sees that the bear has a centipede hanging from its mouth. The bear barks to say that it is giving it to him, but he shouts with fury that he does not need it. The bear ends up sleeping peacefully on his lap. He sees that it is hugging the mule blade like it is its precious pillow. It makes Attel realize that the bear is attached to him because it wants to be with the scent of its mother. He remembers how Lord Calamity tried their best to protect the child so that he would not be dragged along on his dangerous journey. He stares at the bear as it sleeps peacefully. He tries to touch the little guy, but it turns away with the mule still in its hands. He realizes that the kid is trying to protect the sword. The next day, the cub wakes up but sees that Attel and the sword are gone. It circles around in search of the sword, but it can't find it. Feeling abandoned, it starts to cry. Attel then appears to ask if it is looking for his sword. He tells the cub that he can't hand it over. Instead, he puts a piece of the bandage covering the sword and ties it on the bear's neck like a makeshift collar and gift. He then tells the bear to go along with him as he walks away. The cub cries with happiness. It then walks beside him and barks in a cheerful manner. Adel warns them that their next meal is only after they reach the next village. They run together as they move. Meanwhile, a bird is watching over them. Through its eyes, the witch Battery sees the duo through her magic orb. She is intrigued that he is looking at a warrior who can break a magic poison needle. He exclaims her interest in watching over him. Attel and the bear cub arrive at a village. The first place they go to is a tavern for food. As Attel enjoys his meal, he asks the tavern keeper if he knows about the fairy kingdom. Unfortunately, the man had never heard of the place. Attel remembers how he envisioned the fairy kingdom as a sanctuary for fairies on a beautiful floating island past the North Sea. He regrets that he did not write more details about the kingdom so that it would be easier for him to get there. He also regrets writing that one needs to go through armies of monsters, dragons, giants, and ghostly creatures to get there. Men overhear Adel talking about the fairy kingdom and laugh at him. They tell him that there is no such place and that he is an idiot for dreaming about it. One of the men warns Attel to get out and threatens to eat his bear cub if he doesn't. The bear bites his arm in the process. The bear's action leads the leader of the Kiri mercenary group, Otto, to kick a table away from him. Otto warns Attel to leave. The tavern keeper recognizes Otto and gets scared. He advises Adel to leave right away since he knows Otto the outlaw, who used to be a knight. Otto orders all his men to get Attel. With just a glare, Adel takes the man coming for him down. Otto is so shocked that he asks Adel who he is. Adel answers that he is the original author and then removes his upper clothing to reveal his muscular physique. Otto gets so scared that he begs for mercy. It leads to the outlaw being beaten up. The tavern owner thanks Attel and shakes his hand. He shows that he has bounty posters of Otto and his men to show that he has just apprehended criminals troubling the town. Attel asks why the bounty says they need to be captured alive. The tavern owner tells him that he thinks it is because the lord of the town wants to draft them into a war. He tells of rumors that war is coming, so Baron Bert gathers even criminals to fight. Atel's eyes sparkle at the news, scaring the tavern owner. Attel heads to the lord's manor, where he presents Baron Bert with the tied-up Otto and his men. Attel tells Bert that he not only came for the warhorse reward but also to receive reward money. Attel asks if Bert is preparing for war, making the defensive Bert ask where he heard this from. Attel tells him that he heard rumors that he is short of soldiers and so must be gathering them for war against the Akites in the east. Bert is silenced as he can't deny it. Attel also says he has deduced that he wants to capture criminals alive so that they can be useful in the war. He praises Bert for his strategic thinking and speaks about how even barbarians like him know of his reputation as a symbol of terror among his enemies. His words make the Baron blush and make him gloat at how renowned he is even to the barbarians. Attel kneels before him and asks for the honor of serving and receiving a reward from him. Bert thinks about it and decides to give him 10 gold coins and 1 warhorse of his choice. He, however, says he will only do it for one condition, making Attel tense up. The Baron asks that Attel participate in the war as part of the Gasconu army, along with the Kiri mercenary group he captured. The tied-up Otto and his men are horrified. Attel agrees without hesitation. Secretly, he anticipated this and wanted it to happen. Elsewhere, on a war battlefield, Charles, the blonde protagonist of the novel, arrives to put fear into an army. Attel plans to meet Charles in the war because the hero knows who the Fairy King is. Deep in the city was the local prison. There, Otto desperately begged Attel, even addressing him as boss. The other mercenaries of Kiri were also imprisoned in Bleak, as their leader pleaded to be released from their cages, saying he's too young to be their boss. The young man tells him to stop being so loud. His claim to youth makes Otto freeze in surprise, and foolishly suggests that he knocked 30 years off. Regardless, joining the war or deserting the army was a sure path to death. Since their group didn't even surrender willingly, they're told to join the fight and be saved quietly. Still hesitant, the leader thinks about it for a while and suddenly challenges him to a one-on-one duel. The creator of the game blanks out, but vaguely remembers the system he made. He's likely referring to a joust, which is a one-on-one battle between knights, with everything on the line. Rules vary by country and region, but there is one common regulation they follow. Regardless of status or birth, the stronger is hailed as the victor with no strings attached. They'll take everything as agreed, while the one defeated will lose everything they have. Otto was once a knight, and is more confident fighting horseback than in a competition of strength. Adel considers his desperate proposition from the other side of the cage. In the game, the bandit leader gets killed by the army without even having his name mentioned. It'll be a problem if he dies now, and the author's arrival in the game world was already starting to affect the story. For now, he needs Otto alive so he can drag the mercenaries into the war. If he wins the joust, the Kiri group will join the war, otherwise they'll be freed as part of Adel's deal with Bert. In other words, the young berserker accepts the challenge. The screams filled the halls and surprised the little bear. They cheered for their reliable captain, putting their lives in the palm of his hands. Otto worriedly looked up at the tribe man, meeting his unwavering and terrifyingly confident eyes. 10 days later, it was finally time for the duel to commence. The arena was filled with a loud crowd, and the two participants entered the stage. A host controlled the audience, welcoming all lords, ladies, and guests to the show. Although they continued to cheer with excitement, Bert watched intently with his arms crossed in silence. People applauded, as the duelists were going to battle with everything they had on the line. The rules were already clear. They are meant to ready their lances first, then charge furiously at each other. Although covered in armor, neither gaze must waver while speeding towards the opponent. The only contact to be made is with their prepared lances, and the one who knocks the other from their horse will be declared the victor. For the proud, mounted knights, social status and lineage mean nothing. As a duel respected and honored by all, the joust is a battle where only the strong become winners. The arena was filled with chanting from the introduction, and it was finally time to begin. To start, the participants are called on to enter the stage. Otto is an old knight who risks being beheaded for a chance to win his group's freedom. Citizens jeered and booed, even hoping for his untimely demise in the arena. Just then, an alluring voice notes how hateful their words are. The noisy man in the stands stops talking, completely bewitched. Seated among them was Beatrix, who subtly shushes them with a mere gesture. That said, she only came there to see the young berserker, and no one else. While the men swooned from her alluring beauty, Etel is finally called on by the herald. He's described as the mysterious man who single-handedly subdued the entire Kiri mercenary group. Honestly speaking, a lance was not a weapon he was used to wielding. The other members of the group called to their captain, reminding him that he holds their fate. Hearing them desperately cheer and plead, Otto can't help but feel embarrassed. Moving on, the two duelists faced each other bravely. Etel called out, telling the bandit that the knight getup doesn't look half bad on him. Although he's confident now, his opponent was determined to wipe the smug grin off his face. The moment they've all been waiting for has finally come. It was Etel, the barbarian of the Black Wolf tribe, against Otto, the renowned demon sword and leader of Kiri. With this, the joust begins. With their match signal to start, the two duelists whipped their horses, spurring them forward with loud war cries. Well accustomed to this, Otto was certain he could win, and lowered the tip of his lance toward his enemy. Seeing his reach in comparison, his confidence shoots up more than ever. The end was right by Etel's face, inches away from hitting and knocking him off. However, the warrior suddenly redirected it away, perfectly timing with his bare hands. The bandit leader and his comrades all opened their mouths in shock, unable to believe that he caught the lance like nothing. Intimidating them more, Adel grips the weapon and breaks it with sheer force, planting a horrified expression on Otto's face. He learns the spearmanship skill, and thrusts his weapon forward with a monstrous glare. The mercenary could do nothing but wait for the impact, which soon comes like a sharp pain to his shoulder. It doesn't take his life, and instead knocks him out cold from trauma, and leaves him with a limp arm. Beatrix chuckles at the marvelous sight, amused as she confirms that the boy really is a mad warrior. Just like that, the victor of the first round is decided, and Adel gets a new affinity for spears. Otto regains his consciousness for the next round, but his shoulder was far from a jousting condition, especially after it was pierced through with the lance. Unfortunately, he has no choice but to follow the herald's signal and charge in again. Now, the battle had to be finished by knocking someone off their horse. Adel was determined to do just that, but a crazed expression took over his face, and his body took on an unorthodox jousting stance. Otto lowers his arms and freezes, helplessly watching the tip speed towards him. His lackeys realized what was about to happen and called out, begging him to do anything against the gyrating spear. However, there was nothing he could do. Beatrix snaps her fingers, forcing a wave of magic to surge out from the middle of the arena. With this, time froze along with all the people there. The intense scenario was suddenly paused, and everyone was caught in her spell, that is, all except for the herald, who quietly shifted his eyes to her. After a while, time resumed and Adel's horse bucked out of nowhere. He turned around, having felt the faint trace of magic and eager to find the source. It doesn't take much time for his eyes to land on the witch, who was watching his every move intently. On the other hand, the audience was puzzled by how oddly his horse was acting. This was Otto's only chance, and he wasn't going to miss it for the world. His movements catch Adel off guard, but the warrior's reflexes are fast enough to catch on and dodge in time. Despite missing, the bandit knew he could still try one more time. Before he could do so, the young man says he got an idea and, with a demonic face, suddenly jumped off his horse and onto his opponents. No one knew how to react, as this had never happened before, and it was an unprecedented situation of a jouster mounting his rival's own steed. With the sinister expression still on his face, Adel choked Otto from behind, completely unbothered despite being on a moving animal. Some question if this was even allowed under a duel's rules, but Bert just silently nodded from the stands. With this, the second round was going to be secured without any question. A familiar burst magic passed through the arena for a second time. The horse bucked and screeched again, and Adel was sure that something had happened. Frustration was starting to fill his mind. He lowers himself, gracefully landing on the ground and leaving Otto to fall with a loud and heavy thud. The situation was continuously getting worse, and the bandits had to watch as the raging horse galloped towards their incapacitated captain. To their surprise, Adel stood between them and ordered the stallion to stop in its tracks. His voice and energy were commanding, leaving no room for disobedience. With Adel's stern command, he saves the poor competitor from being trampled. Terrified, the horse turns tail and rapidly runs the other way. People were stunned by the display of valor, while Batry just smiled in satisfaction. However, the young warrior was not done yet. He took his lance and drove the end into the ground. Looking down at the mercenary, who struggled to even get up, he reaches out with a smile and confirms that they're heading to round 3. Although he wasn't expecting such sportsmanship in the arena, Otto took his hand and accepted the challenge bravely. It was a proud duel between knights, and now it was time to decide things once and for all. Batry's trick had been noticed, but the young man's keen eye only amused her even more. The audience is thanked for their patience, but given the recent trouble with the horses, the jousters were going to continue the duel on foot instead. Any weapon was permitted, and there aren't going to be any rules holding them back. The signal to begin comes, and it's an intense match from the get-go. Otto makes the first move but gets dodged perfectly. On the other hand, Adel had already raised his axe high like a demon of war. His attacks are heavy and every swing is massive, but the bandit believes that he has a chance, if he at least evades the first slash. The hefty attack comes from above, and it just barely fails to chop the target's head off like a block of wood. With the blade driven into the ground, Otto finds the chance he was waiting for and charges in to take the win. Unfortunately, this was a naive move when going against the berserker from the wolf tribe. Turning the weapon, Adel swings up to hit his enemy, who hadn't expected a counterattack. It was unthinkable that someone could swing an enormous weapon so easily. This turns into a hard and painful lesson on how inhuman the person in the arena with him is. The warrior looked just about ready to end his for good, so the arrested mercenaries cried out for their captain, nearly jumping in themselves. Otto's resounding voice tells them to stop. He surprisingly manages to stand on his own feet, despite the huge wound on his chest. Death had come knocking repeatedly, but he was still determined to earn their freedom. They plead and beg him to stop, saying they're prepared to throw themselves into the war if it'll save his life. There was no way they're allowing him to die in a place like that. He grit his teeth upon hearing their words. Even with their hands tied up and chained together, they still had the gall to talk so big. He wants to do the same, but his fingers don't even have the strength to grip his blade. Adel lowers his own axe and subtly turns toward the herald. Getting the signal, he deems Otto unable to continue with the match. With the white flag raised, he declares the tribe warrior as the final winner of the intense duel. His opponent was still standing, but swung and stumbled as the seconds passed. With an acknowledging smile, Adel catches his body right before it falls completely. He's no longer some nameless character in the game, and was now a respectable warrior who never gave his men up. The bandits cheered for the captain, Bert subtly smiled with satisfaction, and the audience roared with cheers for such a spectacular fight. Fortunately, even Batry left with her intrigue and amusement, replaced with even deeper curiosity. As the sun set, the fighters and their comrades ended the tiresome day. Following the victor's terms, the Kiri mercenaries joined Bert's army. They shared toasts a few nights later, celebrating their group's new beginning with a wave of alcohol. Otto, now much better, led the festivities, even volunteering Adel's wallet for the tab and telling the servers to keep the food coming. Their mood definitely bounced back, which is surprising, especially for the man who almost died in the joust. They bar him from taking any drinks, emphasizing how his body needs a break while recovering. He whines and complains, saying he hasn't had a single drop since he was arrested. It's been 2 weeks since their joust, and he seems to be recovering well enough. Just then, the familiar tavern owner approached and greeted Atel, noting how he's joining the war and certain he'll achieve great things there. The barbarian is surprised and questions where he heard such news, and is told that the mercenaries have been sharing the information. Suddenly ordered not to move a muscle, the flustered man wonders what's gotten to him all of a sudden. However, Adel says he isn't the owner, and was absolutely sure of it. After all, he doesn't even have a scent on him, much like a doll. It's weird for someone who was supposedly cooking and serving drinks to be completely odorless. Asked who he is, the man's expression changes. The air around them had changed in an instant, and a battle was surely imminent. Again, Atel questions the identity of the mysterious intruder. The man takes his disguise off, and commends him for even noticing the difference. However, it means nothing for him to know his true identity, so the man keeps a mask on. Introductions were not necessary for someone who's going to be sent to the afterlife soon enough. Before striking, he first throws a dagger that hits the chandelier, illuminating the room. The entire tavern turns dark in an instant, and Otto starts to panic within mere moments. It was a natural reaction for someone being told to fight an assassin in pitch-black darkness. Despite freezing, his senses are trained enough to let him know that death was approaching. Atel pulls him away just in time to dodge the blade. He's ordered to stay in the corner and keep quiet. Given his approach and speciality in disguises, the game's creator has an idea of who he is, which surprises the assassin. Based on his build and strength, he must be the second ranker, Rashid. The smug smirk spread across the young man's face. Meanwhile, his enemy disappears from his spot in an instant and appears behind him with a blade, asking where he heard that. If he speaks honestly, the assassin might kill him without any pain, but he can also subject him to immense agony. However, his threats fall flat as Atel breaks his blade with a bare hand and wonders if he can do much with just the hilt of his weapon. Rashid backed away instinctively. He looked at his broken sword, bewildered as to how that happened so easily. While he's distracted by the unexpected turn of events, his target swung his weapon's blade down his body. It hits his wooden mask, slicing it right off the disguised killer's face. He staggers back, in pain after having his face wounded. Revealed, the old man demands to know how his movements are being read in the dark. Atel points to the smell of hashish, which the assassin can't deny is present. Although faint, its scent covers his hidden weapons, giving his position away. That said, it's unnatural for someone to read movements just through sheer smell. Affected by his own blade's poison, Rashid fell to his knees and accepted his defeat. Unwilling to speak, he moves to drive what's left of his blade into his neck. Atel urgently called out, reminding him that someone named Cassop is waiting for him to come home. The old man lives, freezing for a moment before questioning how his target would know his child's name. With a knowing smirk, the creator refuses to answer. His beloved son is a skilled assassin, who later becomes a powerful ally to Charles. To protect the original story, he has no intention of laying a hand on Cassop, but mentioning his name provides a huge leverage to use on a desperate parent. Adel says he only has one condition to leave the boy alone. To save his child, Rashid has to become his target's obedient dog. The old man is stunned. Still on his knees, he's ordered to quietly carry errands and follow his new master's bidding. He accepts, now also bowing, and forms an absolute contract with the tribe warrior, told that he's going to be contacted later on. The top assassin takes his orders too seriously and barks in affirmation. Flustered and embarrassed for him, Adel says there's no need to be that literal about being a dog. On the other hand, Otto was still screaming in fear, unable to see anything in the dark. While all this was unfolding, Baytree watched, similarly confused by the strange turn of things. The scene makes her wonder if it's a ritual of some sort, involving some type of god. Regardless, she can only look forward to the future, as she gains another ally in the palm of her hand. With this, the warm spring passed, and flowers bloomed. Although at a lower intensity, the Kiri gang was forced to join Adel in his regular training. On a day when the summer sun blazed down on the continent, warriors rampaged and flames burned hot. The war had begun, and the Gold Lion mercenaries charged forward, with Charles leading the way. Opposing troops stood tall, raising their flags high in the midst of raging war. They charged forward, determined to kill their enemies without a shred of mercy for each other. Neither side was willing to back down, each fighting for their own cause and goal. However, the Aquitanian leader lost his head as he commanded his knights. The men called out helplessly, not expecting the commander to fall so soon. However, they can't worry about other people when axes are flying over their heads. Circling back, while hitting all in its path, the weapon returns to its owner, who was rushing into battle. They wonder what in the world was coming from the front, with such tremendous force. Soon enough, it becomes clear that a single person was charging toward them fearlessly. This seemed to be the case, but Atel was actually panicking as his uncontrollable horse ran forward. It was a ridiculous situation to say the least, but not a single soul could laugh. The soldiers were dying from the simple mistake of being in his way. Heads were flying left and right, severed from the rest of the body. It's a different approach from the plan, but it can't be helped now. Despite initially not wanting to stand out, the berserker hacks his enemies into pieces. Meanwhile, the presence of a demon on the enemy side makes the Aquatanian forces fall back in fear. They turned away and ran with their tail between their legs, but there was no way that Atel was going to let them escape. He takes a bunch of weapons from his steed's side strap and aims. Pulling his arm back to as much power as he possibly can, he activates the skill, Spear Throw, and launches the projectiles with a resounding war cry. An array of weapons flew forward, and they took several enemies out at once. Some knights are eliminated by a single blade, and others are unlucky enough to be hit by multiple. In other words, Atel was completely dominating the battlefield, all while wearing a huge smile on his face. It's as if he was playing target practice on his own, even leaving his little underlings behind. Kiri group catches up a bit late, and are surprised that their boss was already fighting the army. Just then, the enemies recognize Otto, the demon blade, and realize that Atel the executioner must be the man raising their legion. The Kiri mercenary group advanced rapidly under his command and training. Now, each member fulfilled their own role, independently moving according to it. It was all done in preparation for the imminent and fated battle with one person. In the cathedral, an acolyte's nomination ceremony was being held, and Charles was being officially knighted as one of the top officials. He was to guard the truth, serving as a protector of praying and working people under God's guidance. As expected, the women nearby fawned over his gorgeous face, unable to resist his dashing blue eyes, despite him only being 16 years old. A couple of old men watched from a distance, pitifully jealous enough to insult the new knight. As a noble, the Baron says he's probably given the title, to serve as their shield. Just then, a huge hand gently tapped the old man's shoulder for attention. Behind him, an enormous man calls him out for bad-mouthing behind people's backs. To make things worse, he was insulting Charles out of all the people. Incredulous, the foul-mouthed noble calls him impolite for speaking to a baron that way. Someone else approached, apologizing for his company member's rude behavior. He introduces himself as Pippin, vice captain of the Gold Lion mercenary group. The baron doesn't care for an insignificant person's introduction and questions how he knows his name. The young man keeps his smile, saying it's only natural for them to know every attendee's name. He says this so casually, but this would mean that they've memorized more than 500 personalities. Thinking it's a bluff, the baron continues to look down on the commoners' lineages. Pippin continues to apologize, even bowing politely to settle things. However, the baron still wasn't over the incident and now starts to insult their low-born birth. This finally wipes the smile off the vice's face, who sternly says that he was simply warning him about degrading Charles. Insulting a knight without any basis is an illegal act, which even a baron can't possibly get out of. The young man's imposing aura makes him quiver in fear, but he refuses to lose face and just tells him to leave at once. Later in the night, a few bugs of light gathered around Pippin, even comfortably resting on his body. They're bugs that can move at unbelievable speed, incomparable to a normal human's. The ceremony was over without hitches, and they'll be heading into the battlefield the next day. Asked if something's wrong, he tells Charles that he was just lost in his own thoughts. Still bothered, the new knight advises him to let fools do all the talking for now. After all, he's going to acquire the nation soon, and won't let anyone be rude to his comrades. Like old friends, they promise this to each other. Pippin then shares information on a ridiculously strong warrior from their enemy nation. Apparently, there are rumors of him being as strong as Charles himself. The news was definitely intriguing, and he can't help but want to meet him on the battlefield right away. Otto asks Atel if he can see the dungeon from the sky. This leaves the young man completely confused, so the bandit notes how he perfectly grasped the enemy army's camp and troop strength. If it isn't done by him, then the heavens must be on their side for some reason. Unexpectedly faithful, Otto reminds them that he's a former knight despite how he looks. That said, of course heaven was not on their side. Atel actually is able to grasp the flow of the battlefield, but acts in a way that doesn't disrupt the original story. It's the only way Charles finds the fairy kingdom. Just then, their surroundings suddenly turned as dark as the night. It's so odd that they think it's an ominous omen of misfortune. That said, it was just an eclipse, one that the creator didn't write into the original work. Feeling a presence behind him, he turns and finds Rashid, who reports that the Gold Lion will divide into 2 groups and attack in 5 days. In other words, Charles was finally making his move. He commends the assassin-turned-scout for now. The Gasconian army was supposed to join the war with Bleda, but since he defeated his uncle, their military strength was insufficient. They were being cut down like helpless wheat in the fields, and if things continued this way, Aquitaine is going to win before Charles finds the Fairy Kingdom. To keep this from happening, Adel calls to Otto. He can't allow the history of the world he created to be warped more. With the signature crazed expression, he says they're going to strike the Gold Lion group. The news makes the bandit leader scream in shock and disbelief. It was an unbelievable decision that bordered recklessness and danger. Their target is rumored to have more than 100 people as members. What's more, their leader is a dangerous person, who's said to be as strong as Adel himself. Given the young man's apathy, Otto can only curse the oath of their joust. Frustration fills his entire body, but he has no choice but to go. That said, preparations for deployment will take at least 10 days, and there's even more to do. Despite even reluctantly mentioning additional training, their boss insists on leaving immediately. Again, it was ridiculous and downright life-threatening. With a huge grin, Adel says he, Otto, and 3 former knights are deploying right away. 5 days later, in the front lines of the south, countless bodies littered the path of carnage. Soldiers stood frozen in fear, not having received any intel on what was happening. Before them, the Black Wolf tribe was reinforcing the Gasconian army. With the unexpected addition to their list of enemies, the soldiers stood still and acted like the perfect targets for a tribe of warriors. The barbarians swung, hacked, and thrusted, taking the lives of countless well-trained fighters in an instant. Later on, in the Gold Lion camp's main tent, Charles informs his comrades about the Black Wolf tribe's involvement. It was terrible news for them, given the military strength they had to offer. With this, they're rapidly expanding their influence with fierce momentum. However, this was also a chance to achieve military distinction. Driven by such thoughts, he changes the destination of the unit he's personally leading. His commanders and their men salute, confirming the order. Soon enough, the first unit was ready for departure, so he leaves Pippin in charge of the second. Ready to take their leave immediately, Charles turns to his deputy one last time and tells him to stay alive. The unneeded reminder makes the vice narrow his eyes. After all, worrying for someone in his league was unnecessary. Similarly, Ruach was also there to provide support. The god of war was ready to achieve distinction and rise in their country. Having full faith in him and their comrades, the entire mercenary group smiled in affirmation. With this, they part ways to handle their own responsibilities. Pippin was ready to leave as well, intent on bringing a pile of commanders' heads back. He turns with the other members as they hear a commotion from the woods. To their surprise, Adel suddenly jumped out from the dark, charging right into their camp and swinging his axe around like a madman. He's glad that he found his targets. His weapon moved fast, swinging right toward Pippin, who was still grasping the unexpected situation. The ambush leaves the deputy injured. 5 days ago, the eclipse came like an unfortunate omen. Despite obeying his orders to pack, Otto complained about attacking Gold Lion with just 5 people. To turn the tides, the only approach is to weaken the rival group's military strength. That chance was only going to come up while Charles is absent from their base camp. Pippin screamed in agony, not expecting to be attacked so randomly in their camp. With a smug smile, Adel tells him to be quiet and keep himself behaved. The other members react fast and immediately surround him, ready to retaliate. Meanwhile, Otto and the others were still hiding in the bushes. Some want to help, but he says they have to stay if they want the plan to work. It's fairly unofficial, but it involves staying put and watching while their master mows the entire enemy troops down. Atel sighs as he only intended to attack Pippin and leave, but now he has to power up since people don't seem to be cooperating well enough. The mercenary group charged in, but he readily meets them with his weapon on hand. He throws his axe imbued with berserker rage, cutting right through entire bodies like soft butter. Failing to learn from the display, others leapt in, thinking they might have a chance against an unarmed man. However, they miss despite their numbers, and find their target floating just above where they were. Coating his arm in powder, he drives it into the ground and unearths the land itself, sending tremors throughout the forest. Although trembling from his power, Otto says it all worked according to his plan. The campsite was decimated, burned and torn apart by a single man. All the weaker soldiers had died, while Pippin and Ruach barely managed to defend themselves from suffering the same fate. The large commander's only mission was to protect the vice, which is his promise to Charles. The deputy was both stunned and horrified, but this mission was something he was willing to die for. They're the family that he shared warm and happy times with, all of which are irreplaceable to him. To him, family is something to protect no matter what. With that thought in mind, Ruach fills his body with energy and tears a steel shield into two. After all, he is the shield that will stand between his family and their enemy. Atel was impressed by the showmanship, and he confirms that he's starting to earn himself the unappealing and brash title of Massacre Man. Gripping his sword tight, Ruach introduces himself as the assault unit captain and declares his intention to beat him. Answering with nothing but a confident grin on his face, Atel prompts the man to charge in with a war cry that rang throughout the forest. The captain's spear swings through empty air, and he starts to realize the enemy's speed. The berserker warrior was already in the air, reaching up with his axe to deliver a powerful blow. With a single swing, he cuts through the enemy's entire body, slicing him right down the middle. Pippin screamed at the horrifying scene, worried as he's forced to watch his comrade fall with a huge gash on his chest. Adel was completely satisfied with his handiwork, and was just about ready to head back to their own base. Watching him, the vice captain shook with fear, realizing that he really was the Massacre Man. He was strong, equal to Charles. He quickly corrects himself, and reluctantly acknowledges that he's stronger than their leader. In other words, the man before him was going to be an obstacle to their group. Atel feels something wrong. Before he could even react, Pippin was already making his move, and raised his hand to conjure a defense force shield wall. For some reason, the remaining mercenary members rose and came running to answer his call. Otto covered his ears and held his head, evidently bothered. Meanwhile, Adel already knows the abilities of the man who can move 100 soldiers with a single command, forcing their morale to surge despite it dropping just earlier. Empowered by their vice captain, the warriors stood their ground, and the archers notched their bows. With a resounding command, Pippin orders them to shoot. A garrison was put up in a matter of seconds, and the sight of the organized defense makes Otto worry. However, Adel is unbothered by the familiar phalanx, which is a tactic where soldiers overlap their shields to move as one. Now, they looked like an impenetrable wall, supplemented by a row of spears. The simple tactic allows them to defend and attack all at once, serving as the strongest tactic against an enemy that isn't in formation. Rows and rows of soldiers bravely faced Atel, as if he didn't mow them down just earlier. With Otto starting to panic, they're ordered to raise their shields as well. The creator activates his support skill, Tactic Detection. He warns about the hail of arrows that was about to fall from the sky. As he said, archers peered through the shields and launched their attack, sending their arrows high into the sky. It doesn't go straight towards them, and instead drop like heavy rain with even more momentum. Given how thick the arrows are, it feels as though the battle had already been lost. A single impact makes a huge explosion, and everything combined illuminates the dark camp. Fortunately, Adel manages to save his comrades in time, even putting them on his back. The best option is to pull back with a finished mission, but the arrows won't let that happen. He tells his men to get off his back, but they just whine about being left behind. Dropping the cowards unceremoniously, he assures them that this isn't the case. Instead, he's going to stop the enemies all on his own. Back in the camp, Pippin was still ordering the soldiers to keep firing and shoot them down. As such, the rain of arrows turned into an unending storm. Atel leapt across the sky to meet them without an ounce of fear, completely in contrast with his terrified underlings. Filled with berserker rage, he holds his axe, and it seems like he's going to hack all the projectiles away. Surprisingly, the barbarian calms down and shrinks himself with his posture, allowing him to pass unharmed. The waves of arrows continue to come, and this time he just perfectly dodges with his movements, not even using a single tool to defend himself. He's gotten close enough, and uses an opening to dash towards the enemy phalanx. Pippin is shocked by how he dodged the 100-arrow volley and was still coming. At this point, they start to wonder just what in the world their enemy was. To make things worse, his maniacal appearance was growing more inhuman by the second, and his chuckles made him look like a battle-crazed barbarian on the battlefield. Planting his foot into the ground, he pivots and throws his axe into the sky. It headed straight for the thick wall of steel. The spinning blade flew, cutting right through the shield of the defenders and the bows of the archers. Each and every person there was left shocked with their mouths wide open. As it's done its part, the axe spun back like a boomerang, answering Adel's call and returning right into the palm of his hand. Pippin couldn't believe it. The formation they polished over so many years of training and strategizing was shattered completely by a single thrown axe. Left defenseless, they were now prey to the beast that stood in front of them. The vice captain remembers Charles, whom he swore to greet upon his return. As this promise seems impossible to keep, he apologizes and falls to his knees. Atel raised his blade, still burning with the energy of a berserker, and Pippin couldn't help but close his eyes as he waited for death. Just then, the tribe warrior calmed down, called their battle fun, and turned around to leave without another word or casualty. The vice cursed and screamed endlessly, suffering the humiliating defeat. Meanwhile, Adel and his men rode back to their base, with Otto and the others sharing how they thought they were going to die. The former knight tells their boss to never leave their side from now on, but the disappointed warrior says he's going to train everyone from scratch. Just then, they're interrupted by a raven, cawing and approaching from above. He holds his hand out to receive the bird, and confirms that it has a message from Rashid. For some reason, horror immediately spread across Adel's face. Without any warning or explanation, he turned his horse around and sped in the other direction. The night grew even deeper. In a familiar tribe, Charles faced an unmistakable warrior. According to Rashid, Charles and his unit were heading straight for the Black Wolf tribe. They don't know how it happened, but he's set his eyes on killing Manzu, and Adel doesn't even know why his tribe is in the battlefield, when there was no such scene in the original story. He recalls his father, who was supposed to be living a happier life. Cursing it all, he spurs his horse forward, determined to save his family no matter what it takes. All he needs now is for the chief to wait for him. The young one rides as fast as possible, hoping to make it in time. Meanwhile, in the Black Wolf tribe encampment, ear-piercing screams followed the sound of metal slashing. Standing fiercely, Charles looked down and demanded an answer from a trembling resident. He asks if they know of a barbarian warrior who wields a great axe. The man insists that he doesn't know of such a person. Gripping his stained blade with anger, the knight says it's a shame. Although they beg for mercy, he was in no time to listen to any ridiculous statements. Barbarians are the enemies of Aquitaine. The other unit soldiers roared with the statement. After all, they were just ambushed, and many comrades were slaughtered by the axe-wielding warrior. They're hungry for revenge, and aren't willing to leave any enemy alive. Before he could strike again, a commanding voice tells him to stop. Turning to see the source, Charles mistakenly believes that he's found the man he's looking for. Manzu approached, bearing his great axe like always, and similarly ready to protect his tribe as the chief. He's a legendary warrior, once called the insurmountable war god. However, the knight was ready for this, well aware that strength-based attacks always have a wind-up. If he exploits that weakness, victory would be well within his reach. He was ready for it, or at least he thought he was. Charles is shocked, suddenly finding the enemy an arm's length away. As the lethal swing was already coming his way, he instinctively managed to defend with his sword. Manzu scolds him for blocking with the flat of his blade, an indicator that he's still inexperienced. With unexpected speed, the war god was already pulling his fist back, and, in the blink of an eye, driving it into the strongest knight's body. His armor folds like soft metal under the chief's strength. He's sent flying from the impact, and his enemy was already ready to fight before he could stand back up. Manzu praises him this time, impressed that he withstood his attack twice. However, there was one problem. The chief dashed in again, but Charles faced it much calmer this time. His opponent was supposed to show the gap in their experience. Although a blade seemingly moves slowly, the knight's sword reaches Manzu first, and he suddenly finds a huge gash on his chest. For some reason, he was suddenly on his knees, and new wounds were still appearing around his body. On the other hand, Charles reveled in the feeling, saying it was happening again. His blade hummed with power. Raising it up, the knight leveled up continuously, getting stronger with each moment he fought. Manzu stood up but didn't charge right in this time, now a lot more cautious. It's both interesting and unfortunate for him that his enemy was suddenly stronger and faster. Looking forward to the thrilling fight, he moves again. Charles is astonished by his speed again, but doesn't get hit this time. However, the swing of his opponent's blade follows him despite his evasion, and it becomes immensely clear how the chief earned his infamous title in war. For now, all he can do is keep dodging, while Manzu continues to be impressed by his skills. Like someone finding a new toy, the barbarian tries a bunch of things, wondering what would work. One slash hits Charles thrice, and drives him deep enough into the ground to form a crater. His opponent waited for him to get back up. The only one who could match him other than the knight was Atel. It's been a long time since then, and the old warrior was fairly out of breath. However, the battle was far from over, and his opponent still had other things in store. Manzu was in disbelief, as it looked like the knight hadn't even taken any damage. He had no idea how, but all his attacks were seemingly blocked. Now, it was Charles' turn to attack. Empowered from his continuous level-ups, his speed now matched or surpassed to war gods, and so does his power. Combined with his already unmatched swordsmanship, the next slash hits Manzu directly on the chest, cutting through his thick flesh. The chief was down, but Charles didn't have what he wanted yet. He demands to be told the location of the man who slaughtered his unit. To his confusion, the old man laughed, despite his injuries. Quelling the knight's confusion, he tells him to look behind him. There, an immense pressure was walking forward, saying he made it just in time. Adel seethes with the rage of a berserker and tells Charles to get away from his father. The knight, in a similarly unforgiving mood, tries to confirm his identity first. However, the young man had no time for conversation. With his father in danger, unwavering and free of fear, his rival meets his attack. The two blades clash, and the sound of grinding metal screeches. Their immense collision levels the ground, and it's as if their powers howled under the night sky. Adel doesn't instantly win like always, as his enemy leveled up considerably from fighting Munzu. Just then, his head started to pound uncontrollably, but a familiar sound played. His usual skill window now informs him about an error of the second authority. It repeatedly blared in his mind until finally, a tide-changing development is granted to the berserker.